Vlad, did you find it pretty horrifying listening to these testimonies? What did you make of what you just heard?
Well, Jaguar Wright is known to be a conspiracy theorist. I don't really co-sign anything that she says. I've never had her on my show, and I don't have any plans to have her on my show.
You don't believe her?
She got an album in 20 years, and a lot of this stuff is just stuff she's heard, things she's making up, and so forth. I'm not saying that there aren't serious things that Diddy may have done, but yeah, I can't co-sign anything that Jaguar Wright is saying, if that's your question.
Well, I mean, obviously, since we last spoke, there have now been these charges against Diddy, which are incredibly serious. You didn't think at the time we last spoke that he was likely to face these charges. Are you surprised it's come to this?
I'm not surprised, because I feel that law enforcement in general is reactionary. I think that when you look at high-profile individuals, their arrests, indictments usually come after a documentary, a big TV show, or in Diddy's case, it was this huge lawsuit that Cassie filed, and everyone got to see all the details and all the attention that came to it. So, yeah, it wasn't a surprise that it actually happened, because you've seen this happen over and over again. R. Kelly, Harvey Weinstein, all the attention that they got, and then now Diddy. So, yeah, I mean, this is ultimately the world that we live in. But he'll have his day in court, and his lawyer said that he's not going to take a plea deal, because I think a plea deal at this point is probably going to be very heavy-handed, probably 20 years plus. So it makes sense for him to go to court. But we'll ultimately see what happens, because we haven't really seen, apart from some of the funny stuff of, there's 1 million bottles of lube that they found there, 1,000 bottles of lube, and so forth. We have yet to really see what the evidence is. And I think once we see the actual evidence, then people will actually formulate an opinion on what's happening right now.
Do you think there's a lot of people in the rap world in particular who are pretty fearful right now of where this may all lead? Is it a bit like the Epstein scandal, do you think?
I don't really think so, because, ultimately, everyone wanted to go to Diddy's white parties when they were happening. If I got an invite, I would go. But there's a party within a party. There's the actual party where the big celebrities go to, the Howard Sterns and the Leonardo DiCaprios and so forth. You never hear of any of them really being involved in this stuff. They go home, at 2, 3 o'clock a.m. And then there's the private parties that seem to involve the sex workers and probably certain types of people that are kind of in an inner circle. No. And we'll see if those names ultimately come out or not. I think that when it comes to a situation like the feds, cooperating is a very big thing. And I think if Diddy cooperates and gives up some big names of actual crimes that they committed, that'd be a way of actually, lessening the amount of time that he does, or possibly even walking away.
What had you heard about Diddy over the years? Obviously, people knew he had parties, they knew he was a big rap star or something, but the nature of this kind of thing, I'm asking because when I watched, for example, I met Diddy a couple of times. He was always perfectly charming to me. But I've met a lot of people who are charming and turned out to be monsters. The video that came out of showing him beating up his then girlfriend in a hotel corridor was so shocking that when I watched it, I remember thinking, well, this guy is capable of anything. A man that would do that, who's that famous, who would do that to a woman in a hotel corridor, public hotel corridor, if he's prepared to be that violent in public, knowing there might be cameras around, he's prepared to do pretty much anything, was my conclusion. What did you hear about him over the years?
Yeah, that tape was horrific. And after our interview that we did with Roger Bonds, who I helped to bring onto the show, I did my own interview with Roger Bonds. It was a very in-depth, two-hour interview, where he goes into actually witnessing a lot of women that were physically abused by Diddy. Not only Cassie, of course, which you saw multiple times, but Kim Porter. He was on a trip where Kim Porter got her nose broken, allegedly by Diddy, and flew in a plastic surgeon to fix it. There was a personal chef that Diddy beat up. I actually heard voicemails of her describing it. This wasn't even something that she wanted to come publicly with. There was other women as well that I got details on. So I think that Diddy has a long history of violence towards women, but also men, because there's also the Steve Stout incident. If you remember that whole situation, he was in a music video with Nas, Hate Me Now, and there was a scene where Diddy was on the cross like Jesus, and I guess he went to Steve Stout afterwards and said that he wants to take that part out. That part wasn't taken out. So Diddy and his entourage show up at Steve Stout's office and they beat him with a champagne bottle, which they ultimately settled out of court for. So I think there's a lot of violence that has happened around him, and I think at this point it's just catching up to him.
There's lots of rumor mills about him being secretly gay or bisexual or whatever. I mean, I don't care, but do you think there's much credence to those?
I mean, it's hard to say. I have heard, because, remember, for example, the Wendy Williams situation. She was on the radio in New York, and she said that she had photos of Diddy in a gay type environment of some sort. And I had someone actually explain to me what that photo was after the fact. And Diddy came in and threatened to sue the radio station unless she was fired. And she was fired, and she had to go to Philly for, I think, 5 years or something like that. So there was that. I'm not sure how true it is, because it was just a photo, and a photo, could mean a lot of different things. The fact that he's a cuckold, that he likes to masturbate while watching women that he's with have sex with other men. I don't know. Is that gay? Is that bisexual? Is that just being a cuckold? It's hard to say. It's not something that I'm actually into. But I'm sure it blurs the lines between homosexuality and bisexuality somewhat. But I don't think he's exclusively gay because he has a lot of children. It's hard to really say, and it ultimately doesn't really matter. And, I've talked about this in my interviews. I think if he came forward and said, hey, I'm a bisexual man, I think a lot of the jokes, like the no Diddy jokes and so forth, will kind of ease down, and people might actually be a little understanding of his situation a little bit more, as opposed to him denying it. But ultimately, who knows? I have no idea.
We've talked, people have talked a lot in the last few years. It's unusual that so few people in the music business have been held to account under the Me Too campaign umbrella in the way that other industries were held to account. Could this be, following R. Kelly and others, could this be a tipping point where there might be a lot of other rap stars in particular, perhaps with very checkered backgrounds, lots of rumors about them, could all start falling like dominoes?
It's hard to say. Like I said in the beginning, it's very reactionary. I think if there is a lot of media attention over somebody, there's a documentary about them, there's movies about them and so forth, I think that ends up getting on law enforcement's radar, and then you will see things kind of escalate very quickly. It's hard to say. R. Kelly was extremely high profile, and there will be others, but I don't think that the music industry is really having less situations than other industries. Every industry has certain situations and they're high profile, and there's a bunch of other stuff that kind of falls below the radar.
Finally, DJ, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think Diddy will ever come out of prison?
That's a tough one, because I was really shocked that he didn't get a bond. I thought for sure that he'd be sitting in his mansion right now awaiting trial, but he's sitting in a jail cell right now, and it could be years before this actually makes it to trial. So it proves that things are very, very serious on his end. And if you look at the R. Kelly situation, he got, I believe, 30 years. This may fall along the same lines. Except the only difference is, when I looked at the R. Kelly case, a lot of the convictions were based on underage girls. You've heard a few spatterings of underage accusations, but in general, it seemed like most of the women were of legal age in the Diddy case. So I'm thinking it won't be as severe as it is with as it is with R. Kelly. But for someone like Diddy, who's in his mid-50s, he doesn't want to spend 5, 10, 20 years. He wants to get out. He wants to keep moving. So I think he will get out of prison at one point. It's just hard to say, right now what it's going to be.
Yeah, it is. It's a fascinating story. DJ Vlad, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I'm joined now by Ariel Mitchell-Kidd, who's a lawyer for one of Diddy's alleged victims. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. There are so many people coming forward now with allegations about Diddy. What do you think about the scale of this case?
Well, before I get into that, I kind of want to address the prior two panelists. First with Mrs. Jaguar White. She said a lot of things that were very jarring in her explanation of what she saw and had firsthand accounts on. My concern for her, she's saying a lot of things that could be considered libelous.
Right.
And I would suggest that she contacts an attorney, if only to vet the information she has or purports to have from other victims. At least they can protect her, and then they can also do their due diligence to attorneys to make sure that the information she's receiving is accurate outside of the things that she knows and may have proof of. I was very concerned about some of the things that she had said in her prior segment. I also want to address Mr. Vlad, who I know to be a culture vulture, who takes from the Black community and doesn't give back and puts artists in situations where then they are indicted by the police. And he's very much so what we call police type investigation in the Black community. And for him to repudiate what Mrs. Wright has said, I thought was completely out of line. He can say he doesn't agree, which is fine. But for him to be someone who constantly uses the Black community and uses them as a means for his platform, I thought that was very inconsiderate and unprofessional. Now, to get to your question that you asked of me regarding the victims, there are victims coming out every day, even someone who contacted me last night. So, and it's only standing to be more individuals coming out. I do talk to some of the other attorneys who represent victims that we already have known because they filed cases, who have additional victims who plan to come forward, and they plan to file cases against very soon. So it's only a matter of how many more are going to come out, and it seems to be, it'll be very many more.
You've said that you've been contacted regarding the sale of one of the Diddy freak-off tapes, and that it features a very high-profile celebrity. What can you tell us about that?
So actually, I recently was contacted by one of my business partners who's also an attorney, who said to me, well, why are we not writing the demand letter to try to do the catch and kill? And I said, well, if you want to do it, then I'll connect you and you can essentially do it. He was also concerned about wanting to protect the other person who was in the film, mainly because I've known about this for about 3.5 weeks to about a month. I've been communicating with these people who purport to have that videotape. And it wasn't until Thursday night that they outright said, can you write on your letterhead a letter to the individual who's also on the tape and see if they're interested in a catch and kill? And is that something we'll give you X amount of percentage of it? And at the time I was like, I don't think I want to be involved in this, but I hadn't had time to process. But the other attorney I'm speaking of, he's pretty much been in the know the entire time since I first got contacted by these individuals with the tape. And we're pursuing now a meeting with the three of us for us to broker, I guess, a situation where we'll have certain guarantees that once we make the representations to the person in the tape, that we have some level of assurances that this is a valid tape.
And just to be clear, two thoughts about this. One, is it a household name we're talking about here? And secondly, are they engaged in any criminality from what you understand?
Household name, very much so. More of a household name than Mr. Combs.
Wow,
And
really?
Criminality, they are engaged in pornography. They're not doing anything illegal per se. I can't say that well, I'll say this. My concern was that I could not verify the age of the individual. And so that was my concern about not having anything sent to me and viewing it in the way that I did via stills, via FaceTime video. So I didn't want to have anything in my phone because my issue is we can't determine if this person is 17 to 21.
Right. Fascinating. It's been reported there could be a class action with over 50 alleged victims of Diddy. It also feels like there could be a lot more than that. Do you think, when you look at this case now, that he's ever going to come out of prison?
I do not think Mr. Combs will get out. I was not surprised that he did not get bond. I was saying from the beginning that I was fairly certain, due to my experience in the legal field, that he would not be getting bond and that he would be there until his court case. I also feel as if having a trial would not be in his best interest, and I'll explain why. Everything that comes out in that criminal trial will be used by not only me, but every other civil litigator who has a civil case against Mr. Combs. Everything that the federal government proves beyond a reasonable doubt, because they have a higher criteria than we do. It's the preponderance of the evidence in civil court. So if we have the federal government, if you will, doing all of our heavy lifting for us in a very public trial, all of the discovery that is done will be very valuable, invaluable almost, to every civil attorney who is working on a civil case, which I believe we're about at 14, 15, outside of the other attorney who recently said that he has 50 individuals, and I don't know if he actually has 50 people or if that's a shock value number. I'd be curious to see once that filing comes out. I haven't seen it. I do know other attorneys who have several individuals that they are in the process of filing a complaint for. I'm in the process of filing a complaint for another victim and fielding calls from other individuals who I may take on as clients. I've actually spoke to multiple individuals, but did not take on everybody as a client because I was unable to verify what it was that they were saying, not because I didn't believe them or believe that what they were saying to be true. And that's why I've also expressed at the beginning that Mrs. Wright needs to seek legal counsel, not only about things that she's saying, things that other people are saying that she's repeating, only because a lawyer will go and do a certain level of due diligence to make sure that there's a good faith basis that the claims being asserted are actually true. But I never thought that Mr. Combs would get bond. I do not feel it would be advantageous for him to take this to trial, because it would only destroy, not destroy him financially, but also let's even pretend he were to get off everything, which I absolutely do not see him being victorious in a criminal trial. The feds have, I believe, like a 97 point something success rate. He's pretty much shooting blind in that situation. His attorney is not doing anything to help him either, and some of the public statements that he's been giving is actually turning public perception more negatively towards Mr. Combs. Not that I'm trying to help him at all in a legal sense. However, when we talk about criminal law, when we talk about the feds this is not a state case, this is a federal case. When we talk about their success rate for the federal government, especially the Southern District of New York, we're talking about people who aim to kill is the best way I can put it. They are successful. They are the leaders in the field. And anything that comes out, any discovery, any testimony, any depositions that come out will be used in his civil cases, which I don't think he's going to want, because that's all, he's creating evidence for us to use. And to the point that, while I don't want to acknowledge Vlad, the point that he made earlier about being heavy-handed in terms of any settlement, I do agree to that, only because one of the charges, and the main charges, is a RICO. And a RICO carries a life sentence, not just a 25 or 40 year or whatever. It's a life sentence. And if we think about how RICO was created in New York to take down mafia bosses, mob bosses. And that's what Mr. Combs is. He's a mafia boss. He's a New York mafioso boss. And the RICO law was created to take down people like him. So if he were to take a plea deal, it's only to save himself any potential liability in terms of things that could be used against him in civil court. I can't possibly see him taking less than 25 to 30 years in a plea bargain. However, if I was him, that would be the only option I would have and the only option I would take.
Absolutely fascinating analysis. Thank you very much for being with me, Ariel.